All right, good morning. This is the time and place for the Planning Hearing Officer hearing for June 28th, 2017. My name is Roger Kiesel, and I will be conducting the hearings as Planning Hearing Officer. We have two cases today, and relevant exhibits are posted on the panels located directly behind me. The two cases are 3200 Foothill Boulevard, it's a variance, and 2060 through 2066 Verdugo Boulevard, and 3734 Park Place, it's a parking reduction permit. Basically, what will happen is I will read a brief summary of the project. The case planner will do a brief presentation. The applicant will then present their case within 15 minutes. And then speakers, both for and against the project, will then have the opportunity to speak. And then finally, the applicant can come up and have a rebuttal period. If the evidence presented in the application and at the hearing meets the findings for the particular variance or parking reduction permit, then the planning hearing officer can either approve or approve with conditions the case in question. If the findings of fact are not evident, then the request will be denied. Public notice. Notification of this hearing was accomplished by the use of public notices which were mailed to the property owners located within 500 feet of the subject property, as well as the occupants, both property owners and occupants, physically posted on the site in question and placed in the local newspaper. Oh, and posted on the city's website. Decision after the hearing. The decision will be prepared in writing and will be in the form of a letter sent to the applicant and to all people that spoke or responded to the public notice, either by speaking at the hearing or by submitting written responses and having provided their names and mailing addresses. The date of the decision will be the date on the letter. Appeals. Under the appeal provisions of Title 30, Chapter 30.62 of the Glendale Municipal Code, the decision may be appealed to the Planning Commission within 15 calendar days of the decision date, and the notice of appeal shall be filed with the Building and Safety Division located at MSB 101 in this building, room 101. Speaker's card. If you wish to speak, you'll need to fill out one of these cards. Everybody? And as I mentioned to you, we do have two items on the agenda. What I'd like to do is pull the parking reduction request at 2060 through 2066 Verdugo Boulevard and 3734 Park Place to the first part of the agenda, and then I believe the applicant is wanting to request a continuance. So could I get Could I get Alan Malikian to the podium?
Good morning. My name is Alan Malikian. I'm the applicant of the project. We would like to request a continuation to date certain for next week, if possible, a week.
Okay.
For additional information that was brought up or requested.
Okay, so the continuation to July 5th?
Yes.
Okay. So this case will be continued to July 5th. It will be renoticed regardless. We've got we've got 7 speakers, so I'm going to renotice it regardless.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks. All right, so the case at 2060 through 2066 Verdugo Boulevard and 3734 Park Place has been continued to a date certain, July 5th. You will receive notices again. What I would suggest you do if hold on a second. Mr. Malikian, can you come back up? Why don't we continue it to July 12th?
That's fine.
Why don't we do that? So we'll continue it to a date certain, July 12th. It won't be heard next week, and everybody who was noticed for this public hearing will be re-noticed regardless. Okay? So thanks for coming out. I apologize for you coming out and not having anything, but sometimes that happens. So, all right. So this case will be continued to July 12th, and let me give you a second. You can move on unless you're interested in the next hearing. Okay. Okay. Why don't you give it to him? Because I really can't talk now. Yeah, that's fine. All right, let's move on to the first case on the agenda, 3200 Foothill Boulevard. It's a variance case. It's PVAR 1703994. Okay, and this is the applicant is Brett Marchi, and the request is an application for a standards variance to allow a 7-foot high, tall composite fence where a minimum 5 foot and 5 1/2 foot decorative masonry wall is required adjacent to a residential zone located at 3200 Foothill Boulevard in the CH Commercial Hillside Zone. So, let me first go over any comments we got from the other city departments. Okay, I'm in a public hearing right now. Yeah. Okay, it doesn't look like we got any comments from other city departments. We did get some letters from the public. Okay, one of the comment letters basically stated that they didn't believe that there was anything unique about the property, which is one of the findings of the variance. Okay, similar other concerns? Yeah, it looks like we got four letters from the public in total. All right, what I'd like to do now is have the case planner give a brief presentation, and then we'll turn it over to the applicant.
Good morning, Mr. Kiesel. Thank you. As mentioned, this is a request for a standards variance, case number PVAR 1703994, to allow a 7-foot tall composite fence where the minimum 5 1/2 foot high decorative masonry wall is required when adjacent to a residential zone. The project is exempt from CEQA review as a Class 3 new construction or conversion of small structures exemption pursuant to the CEQA guidelines, Section 15303, because the subject fence is considered an accessory structure to the main bank building on the property. Subject site is a corner lot with frontage on Foothill Boulevard and Pennsylvania Avenue. The project encompasses 2 parcels of land. One of the parcels, which was addressed previously as 3210 Foothill Boulevard, was previously developed with an existing 3,153 square foot structure at the rear of the property along the south side. This building was demolished as part of the new bank building construction. The area of the site is now used for parking. Both parcels of land are located in the CH Commercial Hillside Zone. The current commercial building is 1 story, is located at the front along Foothill Boulevard. The structure is set back about 5 feet from the north property line along Foothill Boulevard, 50 feet from the east property line, which is Pennsylvania Avenue, 45 feet from the south property line at the rear, which is adjacent to the residential zone, and 77 feet from the west property line. The property slopes from west to east with an elevation drop of about 7 feet. There are 6 properties to the south of the parking lot, which are zoned R3050, which is a moderate density residential zone. These residential properties are mainly developed with duplexes. As mentioned, the applicant is requesting to maintain a 7-foot tall composite good neighbor fence, which is finished on both sides at the rear of the property instead of the code required minimum 5 1/2 foot tall masonry wall adjacent to the residential zone. A retaining wall exists within the bank property at the common property line between the commercial and residential properties. This wall varies in height from 7 feet along the western portion of the lot to about 1 foot 6 inches along the eastern portion of the lot. The construction of the block wall behind the existing retaining wall will negatively impact the structural integrity of the existing retaining wall and would require significant demolition, excavation, and shoring. In addition, to construct a block wall adjacent to the existing retaining wall would require both the subject property and the residential properties to the south to be regraded with required shoring, which would negatively impact the residential neighbors unnecessarily. The purpose of the block wall, in conjunction with the 5-foot wide landscape planter and 13 24-inch box trees along the rear property line, is to provide a buffer between the commercial and residentially zoned properties. Staff believes that the 7-foot tall fence meets the intent of providing a buffer between the 2 zones. As mentioned, there were 4 emails received that were in opposition to the letter. However, staff believes that the 4 findings can be made in a positive way for the standards variance as described in the staff report. Staff recommends approval of the subject variance, subject to compliance with the listed conditions of approval. I'm available for any questions. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks. I don't have any questions of staff at this time. Okay. So let's start with does the property owner or the applicant/architect want to come up first? And you are?
I'm Brett Marchi with Marchi and Associates. I'm the architect and applicant.
Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, I'm going to speak directly to the findings of fact. And basically, if you don't mind, I'm going to read the four that are required that we meet and just respond to them. The first one is the strict application of the provisions of the ordinance would result in practical difficulties or unnecessary hardship inconsistent with general purposes and intent of the ordinance. So basically, we have a wall that's existing, and we have the wall varying between 1'6" and 7 foot high, retaining the soil on the Wells Fargo property against the lower residential property. And the wall is approximately 35 to 40 years old.
And that's the wall that, frankly, you really can't see, correct?
You can't see from the Wells Fargo side. You can
Right.
from the residential
Okay.
side.
Okay.
Previously, there was an old building that was built up against this wall, and we have no record of how this wall was built. And the code has changed significantly from now to 35 years ago, and the wall would require considerable changes to it. So basically, we've got the 6 residences behind the Wells Fargo property, and 6 of the garages they're at 0 property line abutting this wall. The information we would need to change that wall or do anything to it, the building department would require us to provide evidence of what is existing in that wall, such as the concrete PSI that the wall was built with, the steel spacing, the steel size, and the footing size. And we have no information on any of that. And the only way to find that out is to demolish the wall. The wall's in good shape. It's fine to retain the 7 foot that it's retaining. But
There's sorry to interrupt. There's no way without demoing the wall to determine
no way.
the strength of the wall or its capability to extend.
Nope, there's really no way. I mean, the only thing you could possibly go in and x-ray the wall, but that's not definitive. And the strength of the concrete, a lot of times for a retaining wall, the strength of the concrete goes up progressively. A typical concrete pour is 2,500 psi. It could be 5,000 psi on a retaining wall. But we know, and that affects its ability to resist. So we have no idea.
Okay.
And to get a building permit, they would ask us to do all that information. We can't provide it. And we can't just go and put additional loads, it would create seismic loads and just dead weight loads, and it's just not feasible.
Okay,
So,
sorry to interrupt.
no, that's all right. So let's see. It wouldn't meet the codes. It also lies in a Glendale Water and Power easement area, and we would have to get a special encroachment permit to do anything to that wall that's permanent. And the wall that is built now, the composite wall, is not considered a permanent wall. So it doesn't impact that, and they were fine with us putting that in their easement. So the demolition, if we had to demolish the wall, it'd create incredible hardships for both sides of the property. The soils report that was done at the beginning of the project required us to do what they call an over-excavation of the existing soil wherever any structural element, building, wall, or anything went. And that requires us to dig down 5 feet, recompact all the soil in layers, and that would be 5 feet below the existing wall foundation. The existing retaining wall foundation, you make an assumption that it's 2 feet deep, we would be digging a 7-foot hole in a neighbor's backyard and having to hold up those garages, and more than likely there'd be settlement and damage to the garages, and it would take up a big chunk of the backyard. It would destroy all the landscaping along the property line. We'd have to remove it all to put in this foundation and over-X. So the neighbors would lose privacy, and there's a number of things. Let's see. item B, it says there are exceptional circumstances or conditions applicable to the property involved or to the intended use of the development of the property that do not apply generally to other property in the same zone and neighborhood. And again, the existing topography and adjacent residential structures create considerable challenges to this wall. And again, the excavation would destroy the landscaping, the existing landscaping that provides privacy for the neighbors. And the shoring and work in the backyard would just, we don't know what effect it would have on the garages, but it would create some sort of damage. And if we had to do this work to replace that wall, at this point, Wells Fargo would have to shut their business down for the period of construction, and we're assuming 4 months, because it would take away their entire parking lot. The hole on their side, it would be 7 feet on the neighbor's side, it'd be 14 feet on the Wells Fargo side.
Because of the elevation difference.
Right. And you either taper back that hole so that it doesn't fall in as you're excavating, or you create a 14-foot high shoring system, which is huge. But either way, the bank would be closed and out of business for 4 months. C, the granting of the variance will not be materially detrimental to public welfare or injurious to the property or improvements in such zone or neighborhood in which the property is located. Granting the variance and allowing the approved constructed 7-foot high composite fence will not be detrimental to public welfare because it meets the intent of the zoning ordinance. We went to considerable efforts to make sure that that wall, that fence, did not allow any headlights to transfer through the neighbor's property. We have a lapping board that laps over so nothing can get through. We lapped at the posts. Everything is solid. We added at planning department's request 6-inch by 3-foot high steel bollards that are in 2-foot diameter by 4-foot deep concrete footings at the center of each parking stall. And that was discussed and approved. And that was done for safety to prevent cars from trespassing on the neighbors. And then the finding D here, the granting of the variance will not be contrary to the objectives of the ordinance. We feel that this wall meets all of the standards that I've just discussed that eliminate any kind of light trespass, protect against vehicle trespass, and it's aesthetically pleasing because we faced it on both sides. So other than that, we don't have anything more to say about the findings.
Okay. Let me call the property owner up.
Okay.
And see if, is it Paul Kiesmar?
Thank you, sir. Yeah, Paul Kilsmeyer with Wells Fargo Bank. I'm the construction project manager, and I've been associated with this project for well over 3.5 years. Was involved in the project well before we bought the property from Bob Smith. At this time, I have no further comments than to echo what the planner and my architect has said, but I reserve, if I could, any comments at the end of the public hearing.
You will get a rebuttal, and what I thought I would do is, I did get a letter from Richmond Hoffmeyer Structural
Correct.
Engineers.
These are structures.
As well as, I believe, sort of a map from them. And so what I thought I'd do is hear from the rest of the people, and then I've got some questions for you on the letter.
I'd be glad to answer any questions and reserve any further comments.
Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Susan Bolin. Hi.
Hello, good morning. Thank you for hearing my comments today. I think public engagement is a critical component of this process. I am president of Far North Glendale Homeowners Association, and I served on the North Glendale Community Plan Advisory Committee and I also am a representative of Crescenta Valley Community Association. I would like to refer to my letter that I sent in, that it was attached to the information. The Crescenta Valley Community Association was contacted by Wells Fargo even before they closed escrow, and we were delighted because part of the North Glendale Community Plan was inviting developers and contractors to be part of the process early on with the community. So we were delighted to have that opportunity to meet with them. And we had recently had a situation up on Foothill Boulevard where residents were exposed to some safety issues. So at that moment, we brought up our concerns and were assured that the three main concerns would be addressed. And I'd like to speak to that real quickly here. One of the concerns was traffic mitigation. We had requested that out of the parking lot that there be no left-hand turns from the two driveways. We were pleased that the driveways were placed in an appropriate location on the property. However, when the no left-hand turn signs were installed, they're actually installed backward, and to this day are backward. So the no left-hand turn as you're coming into the two driveways is indicated rather than out of the two driveways. And I checked it yesterday, and it's
Still that way?
Still backward.
Okay, so because I mean this can be solved pretty easily.
Of course, and hence I am bringing this to your attention again.
So what that concern is, if I'm in the parking lot, either exiting onto Foothill or exiting onto Pennsylvania, there was required to be a sign that said, you cannot turn left.
Yes.
At these
and we
two.
do have arrows that on the asphalt that indicate
just direct
say
that, but
right
no
turn
sign.
only.
Okay.
But the signs themselves are backwards as you're coming into the parking lot.
So basically the sign is turned around. So
Yes.
if I'm off-site adjacent to the Wells Fargo site, it says you can't turn left
Into the parking lot, yes.
Okay.
That is correct.
Okay.
So I
All
just
right.
wanted to make that clear.
So, Danny, can you remind me to follow up on that? Yes. Thank you.
Okay. The other issue is we had requested that any lighting on the back of the property near the residences would be a non-invasive type, in that it had the shielding and could only be seen down. The lighting does not have that style. I forget what I called it. I know the name of it, but it's not directed downward. It is invasive into the residences. And I would disagree with the developer in that it does peek over the top of the 7-foot fence as it exists now.
The lighting.
The lighting.
Okay.
And the lighting does protrude into the backyards of the residences on Marianne. Okay.
Okay. Marianne's a street.
The street immediately
Below.
south of the property.
Okay.
Okay. And then early on, it was great that we got this sexy little brochure from the Wells Fargo people. We love the design as an association. We thought it fit well with the North Glendale Community Plan. In the legend, it does refer to the concrete wall that is immediately behind, and it's in the plan that there will be a concrete wall. I would just like to point out that the wall itself, that's the retaining wall, nobody is suggesting that the residences have any of their yards excavated. What I believe is being proposed is a wall in front of that existing wall in order to hold back any dirt. And we were assured...
At the location of where the fence is now.
Right. The fence is inadequate fence. It's not what we were promised as an association. We engaged early on regarding our concerns, not only in the pre-purchase of the property, but also every step along the way with city planners and in writing letters and meeting with them.
Well, I mean, that's why we're here today.
Exactly.
Because a block wall is required. What's out there now is not a block wall, and they're asking for permission to keep that wall and not provide a block wall.
And I would just like to reiterate that the position of Far North Glendale Homeowners Association and Crescenta Valley Community Association is to not grant the variance. We request that you do not.
Okay.
Okay?
Yep.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. Mary Lynn Fisher. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Mary Lynn Fisher, and I've lived in Crescenta Highlands for over 30 years. This variance request raises important public issues. Is Wells Fargo above the law? Does Glendale have one set of rules for large corporations and another for homeowners and small businesses? Why are we hearing all of the problems the applicant claims now and not during the original application process? People in my neighborhood are talking about the City of Glendale's practice of kowtowing to developers and making homeowners jump through hoops. This retroactive variance is a good example. If the city grants this retroactive variance, it will become a matter of public record. Wells Fargo's lack of justification for building first and asking for a variance second will be seen as the powerful knowing they can do whatever they want in Glendale. The applicant's presentation completely fails to address why they chose to build in violation of the approved plans. Everyone and anyone who wants a variance will cite this as an example if it's approved and demand that in fairness and to avoid a charge of discriminatory enforcement, the city must allow their retroactive variance as well. The staff's recommendations completely fail to address the issue of why this is coming up now. What circumstances prevented the developer, the applicant, the architect from addressing this issue in the beginning? The staff recommendations miss the important issues. The applicant intentionally decided to build contrary to the permitted plans and at risk to the safety of those people living below. I'm especially focusing on the third conclusion that, quote, the variance will not be materially detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to the property. What property? Is the staff only concerned about the Wells Fargo property? What about the 6 residences below? What do they mean by not detrimental to public welfare? If an SUV plows between the bollards and lands in the backyard or in the garage of a home below, perhaps not injurious to the Wells Fargo property, but what about the neighbor's property? To preserve the integrity of Glendale's building code, all builders, but especially wealthy commercial builders, must be required to build to plans, or if a problem is discovered during the process, stop work and seek a variance before building in violation of the permitted plans. Wells Fargo could have done this, but decided to seek forgiveness rather than permission. The variance application should be denied.
Right. Thank you. One second. Okay. Sharon Weissman. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Sharon Weissman, Far North Glendale. I'm part of the Crescenta Valley Community Association Steering Committee, and our primary concern is safety of the residents on Marianne, as others have mentioned. And again, I echo other comments that all of these issues that are coming up now should have been known in the get-go before they got building permits, before they broke ground. It's almost as though it's an intentional bait and switch, and it's extremely disappointing. And the fact that it would be expensive and possibly disruptive to do mitigation now is really not a concern. If it costs Wells Fargo business that's the penalty for not building in good faith to start with and not living up to the needs. And the one we happen to have been copied on the letter you got from a resident on Marianne who expressed her concern. And at the very least, before you do any final decision, those residents should be allowed to weigh in rather if they would want disruption to their backyards temporarily, or the potential of a tragic accident that might be of much greater harm. It's
That's why we're having the public hearing right now.
Okay,
So,
well, I hope you consider that. Well, then you have evidence from one that she's very concerned
Correct,
that there
yeah.
isn't the promised masonry wall that would be more protection to her family and her property. So I hope you consider that. And one point, it seemed to me, and I am certainly not an expert, but that you were questioning the representatives of Wells Fargo as though they were expert witnesses, and they obviously have a financial interest in this. So their testimony as a layperson seems to me not the most reliable, and that hopefully you will rely on other testimony that if something is difficult and expensive, that's a shame, and that's why we have plans to start with, and that's why we hope you'll hold them to their initial promise and the plans as were approved to start with. Thank you.
thanks. I'm sorry. Is it the letter from Sherry Stubbs?
No, Emily Lanigan is the
wait a
person who
second.
lives
Yeah,
lives
I'm
there
sorry.
and described the light pollution into her, home
Got it.
and many other things. And,
Okay.
And does have a charming first-year kindergartner this year, and that we would all like to see thrive.
Okay, thank you. Got it. All right, then Bill Weissman.
Good morning. My name is Bill Weissman. I'm a neighbor uphill from the project in beautiful far north Glendale. I brought a tablet here to show you a photograph that was published in the Crescenta Valley Weekly in May of 2015. And I'll go ahead and move this around so everyone can see it here. And what this photograph shows is a vehicle driven through the retaining wall at the 76 service station at New York and Foothill by a 16-year-old driver who was attempting to back his vehicle and accidentally accelerated and drive. Fortunately, there were no children playing in the yard at the time that vehicle came through, or they would have been crushed to death, and there would have been a multi-million-dollar lawsuit. And this is in spite of the fact that there was somewhat of a retaining wall already at that 76 service station. So I don't think we can say that the Wells Fargo property is unique. The 76 service station has the exact same kind of issues. It's in the commercial zone on the south side of Foothill Boulevard. It abuts single-family residences. And so here's a photograph of what that 76 station looks like. You've got the same situation, and you will see along the entire southern property line, there is a CMU block wall. And this is the same kind of topography as exists at Wells Fargo. And so I think the issue has already been raised regarding due diligence. This is pretty late in the game for this to be coming up. If this had been investigated before plans were submitted to the city, then it would be a known issue. And although I certainly, hope the issues regarding light pollution can be resolved for the residences, it's really this safety issue that's at least my strongest motivation for being up here. I don't want to see Emily Lanigan's 5-year-old, crushed by a car that is able to get through between the bollards that are spaced fairly widely apart. and through just a composition fence to land in the backyard below. Because if that happens, I can guarantee you the city of Glendale will be named co-defendant in a multi-million-dollar liability lawsuit. And as a taxpayer, I don't think that's something that the citizens of Glendale would like. So I'm here today to ask the officer to, I'm not sure exactly. It may be totally unfeasible to build a wall there. Something needs to be there to prevent vehicles from crashing through into the yards below. Something needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Anybody else want to talk? I think everybody but one person has spoken. All right. In your, actually, let me pull, sorry. Brett, yes. Can I pull you back up?
Just ask Paul one question.
Sure. I mean, he can come up as well, though.
Well, I just want to. I'm sorry.
Sure. The situation currently is there is a retaining wall. There's the composite wall that's I guess it would be close to the southern boundary of the Wells Fargo site.
Yeah, it's inches away from the retaining wall.
And then below that is the existing retaining wall that's been there forever.
Correct.
For a long time. Also on the Wells Fargo site, but you wouldn't necessarily realize that because you can see it from the residential properties. You can't see it from Wells Fargo.
Correct.
Is that correct? You spoke in your presentation about why, in your opinion, you could not build. You couldn't extend that existing retaining wall up further.
Correct.
Why can't you build a block wall at the location of the present composite wall?
The way loads transfer through the soil is at a 45, they obviously go straight down, but they also transfer at a 45-degree angle. So just say this was the wall, this podium. And this is...
You need to talk into the mic, but you can switch the mic.
This is let's say this is a retaining wall. And here's the Wells Fargo property, and here's the neighbor's property down here.
Okay.
If I put a wall here, a heavy wall, the weight goes down, but it also transfers at a 45-degree angle infinitely. It just goes down at a 45-degree angle. So I build a wall here, the weight goes right into that existing retaining wall and puts a load on it. So the way you avoid that is however far down that footing is, and we've got a 7-foot wall, and we assumed that the footing was 2 feet below, so we've got 9 feet. So I take a wall and I build it, and if I want no effect on this existing wall, I go 9 feet this way towards Wells Fargo's parking lot.
Okay.
And I eliminate half of the whole length of parking.
Why do you have to go 9 feet away? Because of the angle?
To get the 45-degree angle to miss the bottom of the footing and transfer no loads.
Okay.
So it's a 45-degree from the bottom of the footing. And if I bury the footing of the new wall, it actually increases that distance because the footing is going to be 2 feet deep. For the new wall, that takes it down, and it just creates more of a problem. So, but it actually decreases it. But it throws it into the parking stalls, eliminates the continuous landscape strip we have up against the fence.
Right. Okay. So hold on a second. So the composite fence is located where it's at now, how much further into the site would you need to build the wall
7 to 9 feet.
from where it's located into the site, 7 to 9 feet, in order for that, to transfer down?
Correct.
Okay. And that is, you've got a landscape buffer. You've got a landscape buffer, then you've got a row of parking spaces,
Correct.
and then driveway, and then the rest of the site. So you would basically eat up all of the most southern parking spaces. They would go from 18 feet deep to 9 feet deep.
Yeah, somewhere in that range.
Okay. How many parking spaces does this Wells Fargo require on site?
I forget. We're at 30.
It's 33. It's 33 and change.
Yeah, so it was probably 5 per 1,000. Is that what it is?
Probably
Something
4
like
per
that.
1,000.
But, what the planning department requires as a minimum does not function in a practical sense for what the business needs to thrive. And so if we,
Well-
say it required 15 spaces,
Sure.
and we have the site to accommodate more, we're going to put more in there to help the business. So,
Right, but what we care about is what's required, and what you're doing, and what you're doing is basically you're asking for permission to do something that you otherwise should be doing. So, if there's a way that you can comply with parking on the site, and I don't know, and you can construct the wall in such a way that it complies with code and it doesn't mess with the little retaining wall that's existing and it's been there for a long time, we need to explore that option. That's where I'm getting at.
I can, if it goes beyond me telling you that it doesn't work and we have to go back into drawings and all this stuff, we need to get farther into this.
Mm-hmm.
And really, we need to explain this process.
Well, that's
But the process that we went through.
okay. That's why we're here. Ms. Weissman said, I hope that the neighbors on Marianne and the property owners have a chance to, weigh in on whether they'd like this done or not. And I said, that's why we're here. I'm going to answer the same way to you. That's why there's a public hearing right now. We just got to explore the various options.
Well, this is what needs to be said. We've sat here and we've listened to the comments and we've read the letters, and this has been an extremely difficult project.
Okay.
Glendale is I have worked in probably 200-300 different cities in different states, and you guys are right up there at the top. And we did everything we were asked to do and more. Now, excuse me. So let me tell you the process. In 2014, we met with the association, and I was there, and we've basically done what we said we were going to do. There was no discussion of a wall. The project started out where the concern from planning was that we don't do anything to obscure the view of the mountains of the residents. And so we go to the meeting.
Okay, so hold on a second. I'm going to interrupt if I've got questions. So it's your contention that during this meeting, the view is the main?
No, this was preliminary
one of
with
the-
planning.
Okay.
Planning said you
Okay.
really have to respect the view corridor of these neighbors' backyards.
Okay, so we're talking about the
Very
southern
beginning.
property owners, because
Yeah.
you're not going to block the view of the north.
Right. So we cited the building there, and so we're thinking we've got to respect these views, and the wall was never an issue. Was not issue one. And then we meet with the association, and they were concerned about us providing privacy, or we got that in the planning meeting, that they needed privacy. So, fine. We That's all we talked about. We talked about finish and all that stuff, and they were happy when we left. So we went through planning, and we got conditions of approval. And in the conditions of approval was the requirement to build a 7-foot-high CMU wall at the property.
Are you referring to a design review board meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
That was our conditions of approval to proceed. So very preliminary. You know, we hadn't done construction drawings. We hadn't really done a whole lot of stuff. We just presented the building. So we get into it, and we start to really research this wall, and we realize we can't do anything to this wall. And so...
What do you mean you can't? Oh, you can't do anything
to add
with
to it.
With the existing wall.
Correct.
Okay.
So I email Jay Platt, planner. He was in on the initial meetings with Brad and somebody else, and I gave him the manufacturer's cut sheet on that composite fence, and do you have that letter? And I gave him this email, and this is just a back and forth
Okay.
about the composite fence. Now,
Okay,
This was submitted at the time of variance. This should be in your records.
Okay.
We submitted that with the applicant.
Yeah, I think I saw it in here.
So basically, we got an approval prior to permit of that fence.
Okay.
And then I did the construction drawings, this messed up old set of drawings, stamped, approved by planning, with that fence, the detailing, the bollards, and there was negotiation about the bollards and all these things. There were steps that were taken. So it wasn't a willy-nilly thing. We thought this out. We worked it out with planning. We thought about safety, light penetration, all these things. Approved set of plans, permitted set of plans, fence permit, all in this package. Approved, signed off, go build.
Okay.
Construction's complete. Out of left field, we get this response that you are in violation of the zoning ordinance that says you have to build the CMU wall. Complete shock, surprise to us. Nothing intentional, not trying to skate through, do anything underhanded.
Okay.
Permitted.
All right.
No, but this needs to be said for understanding the position here. There's a lot of frustration on the Wells Fargo side, as there is on the neighbor's side.
Okay.
So
That
to
hold
go
on a
to-
second. That gets me to a question that was brought up by the neighbors, in that they contended that this variance issue should have been known well before it was, and that you just railroaded through and did what built this other fence.
Totally false.
Your contention is, at the point you realized that this block wall condition was going to be difficult or impossible for you to do, you went through what you thought were the proper channels to get permission to build what is out there now.
It's right
Okay.
on the permitted set of plans.
You need to come up if you're going to respond.
It's
Okay.
right here on the plans.
Okay.
Correct. That's exactly how we had multiple conversations with the city planners. I was in the meeting with Brad and Jay.
Okay.
And that's what that letter reflects.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
So I mean, and well, for the record here, we came to Jay on September 2nd of 15 and gave him all the specs. We gave him the manufacturer's website. We told him exactly what it would be. This was all a result of the fact that we knew that we couldn't build a screen wall. He said, looks good to me on September 2nd. I then responded back that morning. Thank you, Jay, for the quick turnaround in this review. So this is approved for us to use the shadow box spec to meet the planning approval conditions. Response back from the City of Glendale Planning Department, you are good to go. Thus, we put it into the drawings, went through the full plan check process. Planning reviewed again with this composite fence on the drawings in its entirety, stamped our drawings. We were then taken over to building. Building department stamped our drawings, and we went and built.
Okay.
So we've had this conversation with the city planners and the building department before we ever got to 1 week before opening is when I was advised by Eric Kraus that I was in violation and needed to do a variance, and so we needed to kind of do some paperwork. This is what brings us here today.
Okay.
Not because Wells Fargo tried to ram something through the city that was not approved.
Well, and that's where when you start going down this road of us revising our parking and, I mean, it's getting to be ludicrous. And it's not like we tried to do anything underhanded. And planning had more than one chance to say no on this wall because I was sent back on my first try at final sign-off on planning to add bollards.
Okay. All right. Is there anybody here?
Can I just speak to just a couple more items
Sure.
that were
Hold on one second. I will let you speak again, so that's fine. Yeah.
The
Go on.
traffic signs aren't related to this variance, but the rationale, again, this was extremely difficult. Just as an example, traffic wanted me to put a no left turn sign across Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is not in Glendale. That's in LA County. I spent a month and a half trying to find the correct person to get them to approve me putting a sign in for another city's permit.
Oh,
across the
okay. You're
street.
talking across the street on the, let's just say the east side of Pennsylvania is in
Right.
the county of Los Angeles.
But just to show you the craziness involved in this, and finally they recanted and said, you don't need to put that sign there. But the signs that face out that are supposedly backwards
Right.
are for people on those streets to not turn left into the site, not for the people exiting. The signs on the pavement are for the people leaving the site. The signs facing out are for the people coming into the site because the entrances are too close to the intersection. So the signs are correct. It's meant for no left turns coming and going.
Is that a requirement?
It's on the plans.
That's a requirement coming from, because when I was there last night,
From traffic.
well, that's not, I was going to say, I'm
Well,
That
if
was
you-
a requirement that was put onto the plans by the traffic
So-
study. We didn't.
okay. As you're approaching the site, from either, let's just say the freeway or from La Cañada, you would need to make a left to get onto the site.
Right.
That's also prohibited?
Right. Because
Okay.
it's too close to the intersection.
Okay, yeah, I got that.
So,
But it's also prohibited to make a left out of the site.
correct.
All of that signage was done by City of Glendale traffic
Okay.
and given to us to implement. We didn't suggest, we didn't do anything. We said, what do you want us to do? We implemented what the city wanted us to do.
Okay, but it sounds like there still need to be signs on the site
They're on the ground.
that
was
say, hold on. There still need to be signs on the Wells Fargo site that says you can't turn left to get out of here.
No. We have approved plans by traffic. If traffic wants to come back and get us to do something above and beyond our permit, I don't know how that's legal. We have an approved set of plans stamped by traffic, and we have built what they told us to build.
Well, and that's,
Okay,
and that's
so-
not part of the variance hearing.
No, I know,
but I
but
just don't
what-
want to bring another.
it also, since this has come up and it appeared to be a more simple issue to solve, I thought we could just deal with that, but it sounds like it may not be as simple as
It's up
as
to
I
the
thought.
traffic folks.
So we'll still work on that, but
Sure.
yeah.
And then the other, just two quick items. The light shields,
Mm-hmm.
we provided at the time of variance a nighttime picture from the trash enclosure leaning over down the length of the property, and there's no light spill going into those yards.
Okay.
So we've solved that with the shields.
Before we leave the shields, I personally met with Eric Kraus from the planning department on multiple mornings when we arrived at the site at 5:30 in the morning, and we did multiple variations of the shields that you see there today, where Eric would meet me in the morning, and he'd also verify it at night after we did another rendition. We cut, we moved, we put different ones on. And before the city planning department would sign off on our TCO, based on this whole process that got started a week before we opened, the planning department was okay with the light shields because we had met the intent of what that. So.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
And
then is the accident that happened, is the wall that the vehicle went through a masonry wall?
To be honest with you, I'm not sure. I think I know the site, and Mr. Weissman in the back is shaking his head. If you want to come up and verify that on Mike.
Masonry walls are not immune to a car going through it.
Well,
vehicle.
Well, and then my question to planning is this code issue.
What code issue? The block wall requirement?
The block wall. Is that because of safety, or is it because of a separation of two different entities, residential thing? Because, I mean, is planning saying that if you put a block wall up, you are safe from a car going through? Because there's no evidence been presented, and I don't think your city code is set up for. We're saying if you put a block wall up, then you, the resident, are safe. I think
there are a variety of reasons why the city's zoning ordinance requires a block wall between commercial and residential properties.
Right.
I mean, it's not just one thing.
It's not just one.
It's a variety of things.
Variety of things.
So,
Well, just to close out here, there was no deception, and everything was done above board, and we have gone way beyond what we typically do. It's been an extremely difficult process, and I'm asking you not to drag new issues into this because we're done. We've done everything that we agreed to do and more. And left turn, all this other stuff, it's been taken care of. And for us to be drugged back through these agencies again, they're signed off. It's approved. The only thing we're waiting for is planning's approval.
okay. I'm going to have Ms. Weissman come up, and then I've got another question for you.
Okay, thank you for indulging me.
Sure.
And perhaps I was too harsh on the Wells Fargo people, but by the discussion just recently passed, the final approval they got from Glendale Planning was in September of 2015. And I direct your attention to my June 5th, 2015 letter where I say, Mr. Collin, I'm writing on behalf of the Crescenta Valley Community Association to let you know that we have some concerns about the planned Wells Fargo Bank at the corner of Foothill Boulevard and Pennsylvania Avenue, case number whatever. We appreciate the applicant, Robert Jankowitz, brought the tentative plans and discussed the project with us at our October 23rd, 2014 meeting. Attendees suggested some modifications, but were generally happy with the site plan and preliminary design. However, I expected the general public would have the opportunity to consider at a design review board meeting, which did not happen. This was all through administrative design.
It was through our ADR process.
Yes.
BRB. Okay.
And in this letter, again, June, months prior to the official sign-off from Glendale Planning, we said specifically the single-family homes on Marianne Street, and I might have been mistaken, there could be duplexes, but the same comment pertains, need to be shielded from the commercial activities up on Foothill to protect their privacy and security. The wall and landscaping at the southern edge of the property needs to be tall enough to not allow people to look into the backyards through the windows of the homes. You're probably aware just a month ago a teen driver drove through the concrete block wall, so maybe it was concrete, I don't remember either, at the 76, when he accidentally accelerated and ended up upside down. So the city was informed, and lighting is also of a concern. We mentioned that again in June. The other concern is traffic in and out of the property. Northbound Pennsylvania Avenue left turn lane at Foothill frequently backs up well south of the property, so it will be very difficult to make a left turn out of the Foothill driveway. Condominium complex at 4201 Pennsylvania, just blocks south, was required to have only right turns in and out, and we suggested that would be safe. So these aren't new issues, and we did our best to comply with the process. Like I said, we were happy Wells Fargo came early to CVCA and talked with us. I perhaps have a different recollection, but from the get-go, from the initial meetings, safety of, the potential of a car going out of a parking lot at the Wells Fargo site down to the homes below was from the get-go. Also light pollution, also traffic in and out of that sign. Personally, we've lived up in the area over 30 years, and there used to be a mobile gas station there. And I was in the left turn lane at Pennsylvania trying to turn left on Foothill when somebody didn't look zoomed out and almost killed me there at that corner. So traffic is an extreme concern, and it still is, and it was from the get-go. And I'm sorry, apparently there was some miscommunication between Glendale Planning and Wells Fargo between June and September of 2015. And the public shouldn't suffer for that deficiency. So,
okay,
thank you.
well, we'll need to figure that out. So the traffic sign issue. So
Okay, I appreciate it.
okay, thanks. All right, Brett. The letter from Richard Hoffmeyer, Structural Engineering, really deals with extension of the existing retaining wall up, correct?
Yes,
And why that isn't possible.
right.
We discussed earlier why, in your opinion, a block wall isn't possible where the composite fence is now.
Correct.
And that it would have to be moved in to either not impact the existing retaining wall, or the existing retaining wall would need to be more than likely rebuilt in order to be able to take the load of the new block wall in the composite wall location now.
Correct.
Okay. You explain that to me. Are you a structural engineer? Are you?
I've been in architecture for over 40 years.
Okay.
And I've worked in all different aspects. I am not a structural engineer, but this is structural 101. And it's extremely basic with the way the codes change. And we are constantly retrofitting things that don't comply. And most of the time it means completely erasing it and starting over because the codes have changed that drastically.
Right. I mean, I get that. And at a certain point, if you, if there's nothing that you can do visually to make a determination, it, basically means you have to take down the wall to figure out if it was strong enough to support it.
That's right.
But, so based on your experience, you can tell me that. But is there a letter like this? Is there someone that is qualified to make that judgment other than you, who is just through your 20, however many years experience you have as an architect?
Well, that's it right there.
Well, I think this covers extension of the existing retaining wall, not location of the new block
So
wall.
you're questioning my understanding of load transfer at a 45 degree and the separation? Is that?
Yes, that's what I'm doing.
That's not in that letter, but that is just so basic of a concept that, from a structural standpoint.
Okay.
And I can easily get Mr. Hoffmeyer to add that to a letter. I mean, it's
Okay.
It's very simple understanding, so that's easily added.
Okay.
And if we could just quickly address that, shifting the wall in and juggling parking and all that. Let's assume that it's a 3,300 square foot. Well, we know it's 3,300
Right.
change.
Right,
So
right.
We're
Yeah.
going to need 18 parking stalls if it's
Yeah.
5 per 1,000.
Yeah.
And the site plan, I mean, if you can just,
Yeah, I'm looking at one right here.
if we eliminate that bay, which we will along the fence, you'll end up with 3 down at the end,
Right.
5 and 2. Is that right?
1, 2, 3. Looks like maybe 11.
So we'll be underparked and we won't meet the minimum standard for planning. It's that simple.
Okay. Okay.
So, Wells Fargo's out of business. The site doesn't work. It just doesn't work. So, but that's the essence of moving a wall in to avoid that. And these were all discussions that were had prior to permit.
All right. When we, this was in the file for the project. The letter from Richard Hoffman, structural engineers. This was also in the file. Did this come with this letter?
That is something I did.
This is something you did. Okay.
And that's based on the reality of grading that site based on the soils report and what it would take to construct that wall.
Okay. So, do you have a copy of this?
I do.
Okay. Can you explain what this is showing to me?
Well, there's a code requirement that if you dig 5 feet deep, you have to shore. You have to physically shore that hole to prevent it from collapsing on somebody in the hole.
Okay.
So we'll be 7 feet deep on the neighbors. So we would have a continuous shoring system. And the shoring is something that you come in and you pound in. It's probably what would end up happening.
So continuous shoring meaning on the neighbors, since the retaining wall is holding up dirt from the Wells Fargo site, and the neighbor's property is lower and relatively flat in the backyard, you would shore from their side.
Both sides. You're creating a 7-foot hole. You're creating a 7-foot deep hole on the neighbor side because they're lower. So
right, that's where the hole would go.
We would shore shore it on their side to hold the soil back from collapsing.
Okay.
Or you cut at a 45-degree angle to less than 5 feet. So you make a bigger hole and you take up more of their backyard. So if you're less than 5 feet, you don't have to shore, and you can taper back.
Which, if you were to do the other method of coming back, because you have that deep of a hole, you have to cut back 5 feet. You would then 6 garages would have to be disassembled and demoed, because you can see the dotted line. So you either do what they do on the freeways, and you put in I-beams straight down right next to those garage foundations, pound them into the ground all along there, excavate 7 feet down, or you taper back into the neighbor's backyard, that 7 feet, 5 to 7 feet, so you can get that length down. On our side, and that's why the dotted line goes all the way to the back of the parking stalls, you end up we have to go 14 feet down because
you're that much higher.
We're 7 feet higher, so we have to go 14 feet down. That means we have to over X and completely dig a hole all the way back, almost to our building. I mean, as you can see, that's what the dotted line is.
Okay, hold on, because I'm not an expert at this. So between the dotted lines shows what?
Excavation.
Excavation.
At an angle. Yep. To get down.
At both angles?
Right.
Well,
okay.
It's even more than that. It's straight down in the area of the foundation, and it could be a 5 foot to 6 foot wide continuous foundation to hold up that retaining wall.
So you're going to have that vertical hole there, and then you're going to have step ups. As deep as that is, you're going to have step backs away from that hole, so you don't have cave-ins.
Right. Okay.
By engineering codes, by building department.
Okay. Do
Thank you.
the garages that are on the property line, Is there the retaining wall in back of them, or do they sort of serve as the retaining wall in that area?
There's probably a 6-inch space or something. I don't know exactly what
Okay.
it is.
No,
they're in essence up against it.
They are separate entities.
Okay, so there's a retaining wall.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry. So there's a continuous retaining wall, and then in areas there is a garage, right in front of it. And then, so the garages would be impacted as well. It's your contingent. The garages will be impacted as well because they would be within that area of necessary shoring.
Right, and we haven't done an extensive research with the shoring company, but you could see the impact of those are built right on the property line, So it's like,
right.
How in the world, logically, are we going to protect those garages and do this type of work in that space? That's what prompted all of our work before we got all of the discussion, before we got a permit. This is why we had this discussion, and this is why the composite fence was presented and approved, because of this massive amount of work.
In terms of well, I'm just going to ask it the basic question, and it may sound a little bit dumb to you, but it may be the easiest way to do it. Why is the composite fence, in your opinion, okay when the block wall is not?
There's a thing in the code, structural code, that if you add greater than 5% load on one of these existing things, whether it's a building or a beam or a retaining wall, you're exempt from upgrading this wall. And that composite fence is extremely light and does not put any additional load on there, or it's minimal.
And that's based on existing condition?
Well, it doesn't put additional loads on that existing retaining wall.
And okay, so there was nothing there.
There's a chain link fence.
Okay. So the composite fence does not put any additional load on the retaining wall.
Yeah.
Why not? Because it's not heavy enough? It's not.
Right. It's a lightweight fence.
Okay.
Every 8 foot, there's a post, a little tiny.
Okay.
Every 8 feet.
And so a block wall, why is that not okay?
It's heavier. It adds considerable load and force on that wall.
Okay. So it's simply the weight.
It's the weight.
Okay. All right. I don't know that I have any other questions.
And just to finish off, Wells Fargo, I've done hundreds of projects with them, and I've done hundreds of projects with Paul. We go from community to community, and the goal, believe it or not, with the news the way it is now, is to make people in the neighborhood happy because they're the customers. And so they go out of their way. I can't tell you how many times we've done above and beyond to please neighbors, and that is a big goal of theirs. And it was never an intention to do anything sneaky or underhanded or upset neighbors. They want to leave a site where everybody's happy. And we've tried and we've done above and beyond, and we can't seem to get beyond this thing. And we feel that the findings support this variance request.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Thank
All right.
Mary Lynn Fisher again. I'll be very brief. It seems that Wells Fargo is claiming that the city approved a fence instead of a wall in September of 2015. But when neighbors and other community members raised this issue with Mr. Collin in early 2017, he did not explain to any of us that the city had previously approved a fence instead of a wall. So I would say perhaps Mr. Collin has some explaining to do, or someone with expertise needs to look at the plans that the Wells Fargo staff says were approved very carefully to see what was actually approved. Another short issue. If nothing can be done about building a strong wall, what about placing additional bollards closer together?
Okay. Does anybody else want to say anything else? Okay. I'm going to close the public hearing. I'm going to take the case under submission and render a decision relatively shortly, within the next several weeks. So that concludes the planning hearing officer hearing for June 28th. Thank you.